don't know how I get myself into these situations. Okay, so last week we were talking about the fuel line being messed up and we had a problem with the fuel line. And so this week we decided to go in and add 3/8 fuel line to it using a 68 and late 67 fuel line assembly. The problem is this car is an early 67, so none of the things that should be on the outside frame rail are on the outside frame rail. Plus, because of some of the stuff with COVID, we got a problem with the fact that our fuel line is on, it's on back order right now. It showed in stock when I ordered it, and I guess somebody just beat me to it. Because I checked it and it was there and then it wasn't. So that means that some other dude out there, if you watch our show, you probably have my fuel line. Bad person. Well, good person because you got the fuel line. Bad for me. I'm going to finish taking this cover off and see if we can make this thing work. You need to find out if you have an eccentric on the front of the timing chain. There are two ways to do that. One of those ways is to use your mobile phone, stick it up in there, say cheese, and get a photograph. That's what I typically will do anymore. Another way to do it if you don't want to use your mobile phone, you don't want to get it greasy or you have problems with that kind of stuff, is to take a long screwdriver or a piece of steel like I've got right here. This is just an old piece of fuel line we had laying around that's clean, and I stick it up in here and I can hear the eccentric. It's right there. Make sure you got a little round thing and you're not hitting the timing chain. But that right there is a fuel eccentric, which means we can go back to a mechanical fuel pump. I know there are people who are going to tell me you'd rather run an electric fuel pump, but just to make this thing KISS principle simple for the owner, I'm putting a mechanical fuel pump on here because it should work a little bit better for what we're trying to do with this car, which is simplify it so that he doesn't have to deal with a whole lot of junk. So we know we have an eccentric, now we can put a fuel pump in here. And maybe I won't get any oil in my face this time. You just never know.
All right, so this is the pump that we are going to be putting on. Like Jeff said, this is the KISS principle. This is a stock diaphragm style. It typically runs about 2 to 4 PSI. Carburetors like 5 PSI. And like I said, this is really simple. This is old school. I'm sure you can hear that. Just a simple rubber diaphragm in here, runs off the eccentric on the cam, and you don't have to worry about any electrical issues. These diaphragms can puncture, but that's not going to be an issue for a while. So let's get this installed.
All right, so 16-gallon tank. Why do I do that? I like a 20-gallon tank on things with a lot more horsepower and a lot more engine. We have a 351 Windsor that we put into a 67 Mustang Fastback. We put the 19-gallon 69 tank in it, and the reason I did that is because that engine is just a lot more thirsty than a 289 like this car has. Basically, it's a stock 289. We're not dealing with something that's got a gob of horsepower. We're dealing with a car that's basically stock. The 16-gallon tank will get you pretty much anywhere you need to know us go, especially because this guy's going to be running an AOD behind that 289. So all these things conspire to make me say a 16-gallon tank is A-OK and plenty enough for what we're doing here. Like I said, bigger engine, more horsepower, 20-gallon tank, a good idea. On engines like this one, where he's probably not going to ever get that big, 16-gallon will do. And besides, if you're like me and moving on up into your golden years, you probably are going to stop before this tank is empty because you're going to have a full tank, if you know what I mean, and have to stop anyway.
All right, so this is the fuel sending unit that we are not going to use. This is pretty much for doing an EFI swap in a classic car. This gives you a 1/4-inch return line directly into the tank, so you can run a return style fuel system and not have to deadhead a pump. We're just going mechanical on this, so we're going to stick with a standard fuel sending unit with a 3/8 line, which is from a 68, 69 year. But this is a very nice option if you are going EFI. Like on my car, if it ever stops growing trees out of it, I do plan on doing an EFI swap on it, probably a Holley, but I will be using this style system or an in-tank pump. And if you use this one, you have to use an external mounted pump, which has its upsides, downsides, but that's not the point of this video. So this is a great option if you need a return system. This gives you a 1/4-inch line directly back to the tank, and you got a little nipple here that stops any slosh back coming back up that return line, but we would still cap this if we were going to put it in this car. So I'm going to put this back in a box, and yeah, that's about it.
All right, so fuel pump, fairly easy install, 2 bolts. We've taken this one out, we're going to throw it back in there. The one tip I will give you on just about any car that uses an eccentric on the fuel pump like the Ford small block does, when you're turning the engine over, the eccentric will actually drop down. It's on a cam setup in there, and I'm showing you a picture of that right now. And what you'll want to do is to try to turn the engine over till you get the cam eccentric to where there is the least amount of it on the area where the fuel pump will go into. And what you can do is you can actually stick the fuel pump up in there and use a remote starter to bump the engine over, disconnect the coil if you're going to do that. And you can find a spot where this thing will basically just slide right into position and you'll be good to go. So that's your tip on fuel pumps. I'm not going to sit here and throw this thing in and do all the other stuff on video for you to take a look at it. Trust me, it goes in there when the eccentric is turned to the right spot. Where's my bag gasket? All right, now what I'm going to talk about is what we're going to be doing here, because this is an early 1967 Mustang hardtop. And the early cars, Ford geniuses in the design department went in and put the fuel line down the tunnel. You know, where all the heat goes. So when you're sitting in traffic on a car that has the early fuel line system that runs down through the center of the tunnel like this, all your heat envelope is running right up into that tunnel, and it's going to make the lines get warm. And with what we have going on with our fuels today, with the alcohol-based stuff that we're getting, the ethanol gases, I don't like doing that. I would rather run it as cool as I possibly can, which means we're going to go to a 68, late 67 through 68 on up fuel line system. Now there are some problems with doing that. There is a shield piece that goes on the fuel line that is just plain not available. You have to find them used if you're going to make this conversion. So that can be a real issue when you're putting this together. The other thing I wanted to show you is, I love doing stupid human tricks because there's a lot of things that people do to these cars that just absolutely blow my mind. Someone's gone in and actually put a zip tie and zip tied the emergency brake cable to the fuel line. This is not a preferred way to do things. I'm not sure why they did that. This tells me that our emergency brake cable system is probably not operational at all on this car, and it's something that the owner will probably want to look into down the road. I'm not going to deal with this right now because when we do the 4R70W in this car, we're going to be pulling all of this stuff out. So at that point, we may go in and address the emergency brake cable. But right now, Cam's going to talk to you about the fuel lines and the 2 different fuel lines that you can run into under these cars. And I am going to look through here and see if I can figure out exactly how we're going to route this, because we have to do some things to make this thing work.
All right, so I've got the 2 fuel lines set out here. One is a 3/8/67 late 67 line, and the other is a 5/16 late 67 line. They both have the same bends. This just puts it to the outside of the torque box and runs down the outside of the frame rail. Pretty much they're stainless lines, real nice. So last week we showed you the return sender that I was talking about for EFI. If you want to do a return system, you can actually take the 5/16 line and the 3/8 and run them both at the same time, because that'll put your return for the quarter return line on that sender right there with it, and it's going to look stock, factory, well, factory. But it's a very nice way to get that done without having to have a custom bent line, and it just looks weird. So we are going to put this one in this car. We're going with 3/8 because more fuel, more better, and yeah, there's no real reason to go back with a 5/16 line, because if we ever go to more power, we've already got 3/8 there. All right, so if you see this tag right here, this is a shipping bend. It's just so that they can fit it in a box and you don't have to pay truck freight on a big box. So all you have to do is pull this out like so and straighten it out. I'm not going to do that right now just because we're not sure if we're going to actually get this in today. But so if you see this line, that's all you got to do. This line has it as well. It's just the way they have to ship these things.
All right, so we got our fuel line up inside the car. I will say this, unless you have a lift or you can get the car a few feet off the ground, you're going to have a real problem with getting the fuel line in at the very back of the car. When Ford put these things together, the fuel line was already on the car when the rear axle was put in, so it wasn't really an issue. But in order to get everything to line in and go where you want it to go, you'll probably want to crib the car up if you don't have a lift like we do, and that will get you up off the ground enough to make this work. Now what we've done though is we went ahead and installed the fuel line at this point. with all the P-clamps and stuff in place that I want to use so that I can know where to bore the hole in the torque box. Now, if you have a later 67 or 68 on a Mustang through 1970, you don't have to worry about it. That hole is already there. But if you have an early car, like this one, and you want to run this fuel system, you're going to have to get a hole saw and put a hole in the torque box where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to get my hole saw ready, and I'm just going to go ahead and bore that hole. But you can see how I've done this. I put the fuel line in, final clamped it into position, and you can see I've got a drill bit here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that drill bit and spin it to mark my spot where I want to drill my hole. Take this drill bit out, and now I'm going to drop my fuel line down a little bit, and then take and bore that hole in there with my drill. Hopefully, I got enough battery left to do it. This is one of those things that just looked like it was going to be real easy, and it's not. All right, so we got our fuel line in. Now this took a long time to do. Whenever you buy these fuel lines, you have to understand that it is not going to be a 15-minute 4-bolt job. You're going to probably have to tweak and move things around and play with the line a little bit to get it to where you need it to go. And the big problem with that is the fact that we don't know whether our fuel line is this or that. We have two lines coming in. Neither one of them are marked for fuel. It is an aftermarket harness, not a factory harness. So I don't know which one of these is actually the line for the gas. I'm assuming the park light wire is the one for the gas. You just can't make this stuff up. It's probably the one for the gas, so for the sender rather. So we're going to have to figure that out from up front when we see we got power to the gauge and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not going to do that in this episode. But that's how you get the line in on a 67, plus a couple of other good tips. Cam and I are going to close this thing out, talk about a couple of the things that we need to do, some of the things that we ran into. So I'm going to go over there, sit in front of the car with Cam, and we're going to chat this thing out. All right, so well, that was...
that was an episode.
It was.
Or a series.
I mean, what is it my dad always used to say? That wasn't an issue.
That was a
subscription.
Yeah. That was...
You know, it happens every time we get a car. I don't care whose it is. This belongs to a friend of ours, but every time we bring a new car in, we just keep running across stuff.
Yeah. Why did that get done like that?
The one that blew my mind the worst was the fuel line that had the emergency brake cable tied to it with a zip tie.
Mechanical shutoff.
Certainly a mechanical fire at some point if they're not careful.
That's the instant insurance claim.
I'm tired of this car.
You get into a wreck, you just yank that, and it's a fire damage.
I don't know what happened, officer. I pulled the emergency brake and it just went up in flames.
See, the zip tie will melt, no evidence.
I don't like that you think this way. I am not letting you borrow any of my cars. If you wreck it and then all of a sudden you go, it's an insurance claim.
If you want it to disappear, I can handle that for you.
He's lying. Anyway, so I mean, you know, there was a lot of stuff on the car. We've got more things to do, but we've run out of time at this location.
Yes.
The house is sold. The new people will be taking ownership in 10 days, 9 days. So we have to clear everything out of here. Somehow we have to manage to get the lift out the door and over to our new location at Rusty Acres. We've got a lot to do in a very short amount of time. So today, after we run cameras or we're done with cameras, we're packing all the camera gear up and we're going to literally take almost everything out of here with the exception of the car and the lift. And then we'll be starting to shoot over at Blanchard out in the weather.
Fun.
Because we've been fighting with the county, not fighting with, but we've been working toward getting permits from the county because we had to get a survey done. I'm not going to go into all that here. There will be a series of videos that we put up that Andrew's going to edit on what we did to get the lot cleared and what it did to do the concrete and what we ran into with the county. all the little things that we did. I don't know how many videos that'll end up being. It's going to be either, if I'm lazy, it'll be part of the Auto Resto Mod run. If I am not lazy and I have Andrew do it, it'll probably be its own little thing. I guess that's really it. So anything else we're going to be doing on this car, you'll be seeing over at the new location. Do me a favor though, go out and check out the Patreon account. At the $10 a month level, you get monthly meetings with me on Zoom. And it's a whole bunch of people getting together having a ball. We enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. You will also be receiving your own set of videos as a Patreon member. Right now we're doing one a month, and as Andrew gets more comfortable with the editing process, we're going to be upping that to possibly 2 a month. So you'll get videos as well as the monthly meeting. So check that out at the $10 a month level. We answer tech questions and all that. It is a lot of fun. Also, subscribe to the channel. We have found that YouTube has changed their algorithms, and it is affecting a lot of different channels. Even guys like Peter McKinnon, who is a videographer and photographer that I follow for what we do with this stuff. Peter has even seen some things happening to his channel and made a video on it. So I figure if guys as big as him, because he's in the 2 million, 3 million ranks, maybe even 5 by now, he's got a ton of viewers, and yet he's still seeing a slide, if you will, in his viewership. So if you subscribe to the channel and you click the bell for notifications, you'll get the how-to from us every week like you normally do, and you'll get an email in your email box that says, hey, videos are up. So do that for me, please, and that'll help you guys get the tech you need to see. Also, finally, you guys be kind to each other, be nice to each other, love on each other. You have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Auto Resto Mod.
So who's gonna have to pack the engines? Logan. Logan.
I've seen him pack. You're going to put the engines in the
I know. I always get.
We like 3/4 of the way home, and there'd be a 302 over here, a 383 Chevy worth $5,000 over there, and he'd be like, "I used bungee cords. I don't know why they didn't stay."
It was on there when it was left, man.
No, with Logan is, it was on there when it left, because he's got that super deep man voice.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's affected or not. I want to know what he talks to his girlfriend like.
Oh,
is that the same?
Could you
voice?
imagine if he talked to her in like the tone that you talk to a dog?
Hey, baby. I wonder if he sounds like Barry White when he talks to her. I can't even Barry White, but I mean, if he talks like Barry White, that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
Because we could put the Barry White music underneath, like as soon as he starts talking to her, because he got his little teen suite, right?
Yeah.
Little Barry White music underneath. As soon as he starts talking,
Let's get a stereo and put it in the window.
You want a Coke? Bye.
Hey, baby.